What most entrepreneurs who are launching do is they take easy to use and they build what they think is easy to use. And then they put it out in the marketplace and it doesn't get the result they want. So the second question that you ask is, what has to happen? How do you know that it's easy to use? And what happens is the buyer gives you what I call their buyer blueprint. They're gonna say, I want it to be mobile. I use an iOS, not an Android. I want to pay for it once, not every month. They'll give you all those things. As an entrepreneur launching, what you do is build that. Just build that and push that out, and it will give you a much higher chance of being successful at the get-go.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with patents and trademarks and everything else with their business. And if you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time to chat. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Scott Duffy. And Scott is just a quick introduction. Grew up in LA, went to college, I think in San Diego, started his first business as a freshman while he was in college. And then as he was going through schooling, got in a bad car accident, forced him to drop out, changed a bit of the trajectory he went on or was going in with it in his life, and then got into personal development, did that for a period of time, got burned out, and then kind of switched over to the tech and startup industry, was doing that for a while. 2008 kind of came along, caused a few things to crash or to otherwise need to pivot. So he pivoted to kind of where he's at today, and he'll get into a bit more of that as we talk. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Scott.
What's up, Devin? You looking good over there?
Fired up. I always say it's better to look good than to be good. So I'm glad I'm at least looking good. So no, I'm doing great. So I gave kind of the brief introduction, a little bit about your journey, but let's go back in time a little bit. Tell us a little bit about growing up in LA, going to college, and how that started your journey out.
Sure. Well, I like you said, I grew up in LA, went to school down in San Diego at the University of San Diego, and I got some really great advice when I was going into my freshman year from a family member. What the family member shared with me is they said, on your first day of school, before you actually go to class, make sure to go to the career counseling department and get to know the person that runs it and build that relationship and tell that person, let them know that when summertime comes, you want to get a great internship and you love to work together with them on that, right? On like setting that up. So I thought it was great advice. And I ended up doing that. And I went and got to know this guy, and he's totally cool, who ran career counseling. And I was always kind of stopping by the office to say hello and see what he had. Never had anything for me. And then one day he calls and he's like, Scott, I got it. I'm like, you got it? Well, he's like, I've got it. He said, I got the perfect thing for you. So I'm like, yes. So I get in the car, I drive up to school. Now, here's the thing. Back then, if you got a great internship, you were interning for like IBM or Xerox or maybe Microsoft back in the day. I'm not even sure some of those companies still exist, but if they do,
I think Microsoft still exists as far as I'm aware.
So it was back then. So anyway, so I just wanted to know who it was. And so I sat down with him. I said, who is it? And he said this, AAA student painters. I'm like, student painters? He's like, no, AAA student painters. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, look, Scott, he said, I've gotten to know you over the course of this last year. And he said, all I see is entrepreneur in you. And he said, so what I want to do is, he said, I want to find you a path to learn how to actually write a business plan and start and build a team and run your own P&L. And I want you, and these guys are going to teach you how to do it. It's kind of like a franchise. So that's how I started. I started as a high school student painting business. I had like 14, 15 people that were primarily college students that were working for me painting houses. And everything was pretty much a disaster. The entire thing, you know? And it's funny because I learned a lesson at that time. The lesson I learned is the franchise, you know, or this type of business, what they did is they laid out a plan and they said, this is what works, right? And I've learned as I've gotten older, there's really two ways to learn: through trial and error, which takes a lot of time and money, or by modeling, finding people out there producing the results that you want, find out what they're doing, their belief, strategy, and syntax, do the same things to produce the same results. Well, I got the book, which was the perfect model. And like a lot of people, I decided to do everything else and just make it up on my own. And it didn't really work, but it was a great experience. And for me, it became the foundation of everything I did as an entrepreneur after that.
Now, one question. So first of all, I think that's cool that you went, you basically bugged the guidance counselor saying, hey, I'm going to keep you a friend of mine so that I get the good position or the good opportunity, which I think is, was great advice. And definitely usually what happens is you get into like, oh, it's February, March. Oh, I guess I better start thinking about an internship. And by that time they're either already all filled or you're scrambling or you're getting something less. So I think that was a great piece of advice. So you're doing that, you do the internship, you get some good experience. And then I think that where did the car accident play into that, in the sense that sounds like it kind of adjusted or created a different trajectory than what you were planning on?
Yeah. So, I really love college. I love the whole thing. I love the experience. I played sports. I was just really, really active. And there was a tradition when I was at school in San Diego where after the fall and the spring midterm exams, everyone would kind of like pile in their cars and we'd head 9 hours south over the border to San Felipe, Mexico, and just have a great San Felipe, Mexico time. Right. And in my junior year, my third year of college, I finished exams early and decided to go down early with a group of people to help set up. And for anybody that's been down to Baja, Mexico, maybe you can kind of picture this, or even if you haven't. Basically, what would happen back then is we would cross the border and you'd go down these roads that were federal highways. And there's literally one lane in each direction and then desert as far as you can see. And for some reason, there's like a rise in the road at some point. I don't know if it's like a floodplain or something, and then a drop and then just desert. Well, we were cruising down the road and we were going fast. And there was a car that had gone off the side, a truck that had gone off the side, tried to gun it back in. And he didn't see us, we didn't see him. And we hit this guy going like, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. And it was the worst day of my life. And the question that I ask people is this, how many times have you been going down a road in your life? And maybe you're doing everything right. Maybe in business, you had the perfect idea, you wrote the perfect plan, you put the perfect team in place, you executed perfectly, flawlessly. And then it's like it came out of nowhere and it completely knocked you off course. And everything that you've done, think about it. Maybe it was COVID. Maybe it's an illness. Maybe you had to move. Like everything you did up to that point, you had to throw out and you had to start over. Every call, every email, every plan. Well, that's what happened to me. I ended up with 2 brain hemorrhages. I had to drop out of school and it took me a while to get better. And I couldn't do anything when I was getting ready to get better. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch. Everything made me sick. Until one day a roommate came in and he said, my dad thinks you should listen to this. And it was a motivational book on tape. And so I started listening and I could keep it really low and it was okay. And I don't know how much I actually like could retain, but it just seemed to sink in. And before you knew it, I had a library. And as I got better, I decided I wanted to go work for any of these people I listened to. And the first person I applied to intern for was Tony Robbins. And that was only because he was the closest trainer to where I lived. And so anyway, they offered me a job at Robbins Research and I ended up never graduating from college. I started working for Robbins when I was 20. He was 30.
One question. So you backing up, just unpack that just a little bit. So first of all, got in the car accident, had to drop out of school because if you can't even or read or watch a TV or anything else, it's probably going to be hard to, be able to study or to be able to keep up with anything of that. Not to mention you're pretty banged up, but then you get, at least I imagine that's going to be a bit depressive, or it's going to be a hard pill to swallow, or it takes a bit of time to figure out, okay, if I can't do that for a period of time, what I'm going to do. But I think that's awesome that somebody came along and say, hey, let's at least give you something to do, listen to these tapes. But you listen to those and you get into that, applying for Tony Robbins, I think at, that time, and he's still a big individual and has a lot of following in that. Was it just happenstance? I would assume that people in that industry would love to we work for him or intern for him or anything else. Was it just happenstance, or how did you actually land that?
So I didn't know anybody there. By the way, San Diego back then was like the Silicon Valley of the speaker industry. All the big business speakers, personal development speakers, authors, they were there. Tony Robbins, Dennis Waitley, Jim Rohn, who I worked for. Everybody was there. And so I'm like, I got to stand out. And I'd really listened to his stuff. And so what I did is, he's a big guy, 6'7". I went and I got this big cardboard box, this tall box, and I filled it halfway with packing material. And in the center, what I did is I put one of his tapes, the cover of his book, a picture of his wife from his Robbins Research magazine at the time, a thing, and then I put my resume in the middle. And then I filled the rest with packing material. And I put on the top, how can Robbins Research benefit with Scott Duffy as a member of its team? And we had pledges. I was in a fraternity. I had one take it to the office. And I said, if he doesn't take it, or if he's out of town, like the guy that runs the company doesn't take it, bring it back. We'll try it again tomorrow. And so anyway, I think they just kind of got a kick out of it. And the thing is,
so just like, did they take it the first time, or did he have to go back?
They took it the first time. They called me back laughing, and they said, come on in. And I was applying for an internship, and they gave me this job. And the funny thing is, they said you're hired, and I thought I was hired for an internship. And everyone knew except for me, I was hired for a job. It was kind of like, it was a funny thing. Anyway, but the whole point is, in life, especially today, you got to do something different to stand out, because it is so damn competitive out there. And so what is that one little thing, that extra little thing that you're going to do? And the thing is, what's really cool is that we used to think that we had to be the mirror image of something that we looked up to. We used to think if we were in business, we had to be Jack Welch, or we had to be Oprah, or we had to be this person or that person. What people buy is they buy you. So whatever that thing is that makes you, that makes you unique, that's what you bring to the table. That's how you stand out. For me, the way I kind of did this thing was my thing, but for you, it could be totally different.
No, and I think that's a cool story. I mean, it's always interesting. I can't remember which book I read, but it was one of the books. And I'm usually, if I either two ways I consume, I either love to watch or listen to podcasts, or I love to read books. But it was one of them, and I can't remember which business, that he sent one shoe to the individual, and it was to say, hey, if you want to get the other shoe, basically come talk to me, and or give me a chance to interview with you. And I think those same things of they, as in now, is on the other side of being an employer. You get bombarded with a lot of people that are wanting jobs or positions, especially if you're successful. And, all the resumes, or especially if you're having a position, start to look the same. And so standing out and actually doing something to set yourself apart, always, I think, always is beneficial. So I give you kudos. I think that's a very innovative way to go and land that position.
Let me share with you a story, as long as we're kind of on this thread. So
Sure.
When I was at Fox Sports, I was on the team that we launched foxsports.com, and I ran sales, marketing, and business development, did some ops stuff. And so I used to get a ton of resumes, and everything looked the same, right? And then one day I got this box that came from me, and it was a whiteboard. And the whiteboard, it said chalk talk, right? Which is a phrase you use in sports. I'm going to give you chalk talk, because before whiteboards, you'd write on the chalkboard. So I'm going to give you chalk talk. So this person it was a woman, and she had written the chalk talk, and it was the X's and O's, like a play that she had drawn out on the board of why I should hire her. And then her resume was her sports resume. So it made it look like a professional. There was nothing about business. What it was is a picture of her, like on her dad's lap in a jersey when she was this big, all the way up to when she became, I think she was a Washington State cheerleader.
Hmm.
And it was so creative. I didn't have a job. I'm like, you got to come in. I'm going to refer you to every single person that I know.
Hmm.
And it's always worked. When I take a look so I was in the training industry, kind of burned out of it. And during that time, I kind of got bit by the tech bug.
Hmm.
I fell in love with the internet. So the internet first became commercial in October of 94. And what that means is it was the first time there was a graphical user interface, or what we call a browser, Mosaic from Mark Andreessen in Chicago. Anyway, so 2 months later, I started an internet company.
Well, just a second before you dive into that, because you did the personal development for a period of time, and I think we chatted before the podcast started. Is you got burned out a bit, or you're looking for a transition? So maybe how did you, as you get, and it happens, you work a lot of hours, or you done this, you can only do it so many times and still get excited for it, and you're saying, hey, I need to get a shift, or I need to re-gear. So talk a little about how you burned out, and then how did you land in the tech industry, and then certainly dive in.
Well, I mean, so the way I landed in the tech industry was I was burned out of being in that thing. I didn't want to travel anymore. We were on the road all the time, and I'm in my early 20s. I'm a young guy, and so I was kind of in between. And I ended up going and working for a bar. I worked for a place called Chillers. We served these like slushy Slurpee drinks. And it was awesome. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And it was one of those times in our lives, and I think that all of us go through this at some point, where we're searching and we're looking and we're like a little lost, but we know that if we just got a shot somewhere, that we just go in and we do a great job. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find my thing. And then one day my roommate called me, my old roommate, like the guy with the tape. He calls me and he called me Duff for Duffy. He's like, Duff, what are you doing these days? I said, nothing. He goes, awesome. We're going to start an internet company. I said, what's an internet company? He said, what does it matter? You just told me you're not doing anything and you're trying to figure out what to do. He's like, just go for it. So, just me overthinking things. So anyway, we tried this thing. It was a consumer internet access company, give you access. Anyway, didn't work. Didn't work at all. We were way too early. Nobody knew what we were talking about, including me. And so, but what happened was I got exposed to some amazing stuff coming out of Stanford, like the guys that were working on what became Yahoo, and the guys at Carnegie Mellon working on what became Alta Vista. And I'm like, the action is in the Bay Area for this. And I'm kind of falling in love with this. I got to get up there. But I didn't have an into a company, whatever. I had some friends that lived up there. So I went on what I call the couch tour. And the couch tour, you guys may know what this is, right? Where you basically take your tips from Chillers and you get in the car when you don't work and you drive to San Francisco and you stay on your friends' couches. That's what I did. And I did it for about 6-7 months. And then eventually I started to get really behind. I got behind on my rent. I owed my family a little bit of money. And I kind of ran out of couches. And on this one day, really sucked. I was up there and I couldn't get a hold of anybody to stay at their house. They were probably avoiding me like the plague at that time. Right?
Like, we're tired of this guy sleeping on the couch. We'll just pretend we didn't get his call.
Exactly. Send a voicemail or whatever you did back then. So it was a rainy night. It was freaking cold. And I was in Foster City and I was sleeping in my car in a dirt lot outside of Oracle. Now that place is all buildings. And I got a call and I was really down and I was really depressed. It was from a family member. And they said, we have no idea what you're doing. You owe us money. You're not around. Like, and we've had a family business for 50 years. Like, we think you should come back and do that. And I had to make a choice. And we all go through this in life where we have to make these choices, take us in one or two different directions. Do I go home or do I stay? But what I decided to do was I turned on my car, I drove overnight, and I went back to LA. But here's what I did. I went into my place. I was there shared it with my sister. I took everything out of my room and I went to a pawn shop in Santa Monica. and I sold everything that I had.
Hmm.
I sold a Rolex I bought when I worked for Tony Robbins. I sold my freaking high school ring. I sold a bracelet that a
Hmm.
girlfriend had given me when I was in high school or college. Like I sold everything. They just wouldn't take the basketball in the file cabinet.
Hmm.
And I went, I paid back what I owed, got caught up on the rent, and that same day I drove back up to the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And I had $200. And the question is, what do you do with your last $200?
Hmm.
You got to be creative. The answer for me was you buy pizza.
Of course, why not? That's exactly what you need.
That's what you do. And back then, there weren't a lot of internet companies. All the internet companies were basically engineers. There was nobody was selling anything.
Hmm.
And so, what I did is I picked the ones that I knew. I went to a Domino's. I made a deal. I bought pizzas, printed my resume out. Here's the key, by the way. I smashed it as deep as I could into the cheese and the pizza. So if
Hmm.
somebody wanted to eat, they literally had to pull my freaking thing out.
Hmm.
And I figured somebody'd be hungry. And that's what happened. A guy named Bill Peck, the father of internet advertising, called me and he was cracking up. And he said, I don't know if I have a job for you, but I promise if I don't, I'll find you one. And it totally changed my life.
Hmm.
And then from there, I was on the ground floor of a series of companies that through IPOs and partnerships became big global brands. So the launch team of CBSSports.com, what became NBC Internet, FoxSports.com. And then eventually I started and sold a company to Virgin and ran it for that group for a couple of years.
So that kind of gives you a great transition. Is certainly a fun story as to how you could kind of pivoted and adjusted throughout the journey. So take us now to where you're at today. So you're still there. What are you doing today? And kind of what's the next 6 to 12 months look like for you?
Yeah. So today, what I do is, my mission in life is simple. My goal is to help change the world, to do it through entrepreneurship, to empower an army of people. Because if there's anything I've learned during COVID, it's not politicians that are going to solve our problems.
Hmm.
It's people like you and me.
Sure.
It's entrepreneurs that are going to figure out what's wrong, figure out how to fix it, figure out how to finance it. Those are the people that change the world. And so I want to be a part of helping people to do that. So I have this proprietary mapping method that I use to help people to build companies. I have launched an online academy called the What Now Academy. We'll teach you what to do now, what's coming next to build a great business. And you can check that out at www.whatnow.academy. And that's really my focus now on what it is that I do,
Hmm.
providing a ton of content to empower people to build amazing companies that change the world.
No, I think that's an awesome mission, and awesome business. Sounds like it'd be a ton of fun. So, well, that kind of brings us up today, or brings us up to where you're at today, and it kind of is a good transition to. I always ask 2 questions at the end of each podcast, so we'll jump to those a bit now. So, the first question I always ask is: along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
The worst business decision I ever made was not to sell pee. That was the worst business decision I ever made. And to kind of help create a framework for that,
All right.
in 2008, when the market crashed, I was having the time of my life. I made tons of money. I was working alongside my hero entrepreneur, Richard Branson. We had this
Hmm.
great company that was totally well timed. And then it was just like the rug got pulled out. Like probably a lot of people feel with COVID,
Hmm.
or just like that, the whole world changed. And for me, what that meant is when the market crashed, so did our industry and our business. I
Hmm.
went from feeling like I had everything to losing everything, going over 400,000 in debt. We had our first child, got pregnant with the second. I lost the business. I mean, it was a disaster.
Hmm.
And for about a year, I probably did what I think every good entrepreneur would do, which is like curl up in the fetal position in my room and just try and get through. And one day I got a call from a guy about a year, 2 years in, and he said, Scott, I hear you're looking to run a company. And I said, I am. He said, you're hired. And I'm like,
Hmm.
what do you want me to do? That's amazing.
Hmm.
And he said, come and meet me for lunch and I'll tell you. And I got there And I sat down and said, what is it? He said, you know what? You're not going to run the company anymore. You're going to be a salesman for me. I said, great. What am I going to sell? And he said, pee. And I said, what? He said, you're going to sell pee. I said, what the hell does that mean? He said, I just bought a research lab and we specialize in processing urine. He's like, you go to the doctor's office, you pee in a cup, they send it to me. We spin it, send back a report, tell the patient. He said, what I'm going to have you do is call on all the doctor's offices in Southern California and win their pee business. In a year, his vision for me was I was going to be the king of pee. And I was so mad and I was so insulted. My ego was so in the way. I didn't take that job. And the thing is, when life knocks us down, what I've learned is the most important thing isn't necessarily to focus on finding the next huge win today. The first thing we need to do is create some financial stability underneath us that can create that stability, kind of like the legs that hold up the tabletop. And figure out, how do we do these things? How do we pay for our basic bills? How do we create some sense of security? Because when we start to do that, we change our energy, which puts us in a different position to go out and find the big thing. And so instead of saying yes, I said no and got deeper and deeper and deeper until I turned things around. So the biggest mistake I ever made was not selling pee.
Hey, that's a good story. I'm like, not silly pee. I'm like, I don't know how you sell pee, but that is a good mistake to make and certainly a unique one. So now we'll jump to the second question I have, which is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
The one piece of advice I give them is I think the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make is that they focus on like building, and then pushing something out to the marketplace. I was talking to Gary Vee about this. And I said, what's the biggest mistake people make? He said, they don't respect the market. It's all tied together. You see, the two most important questions you have to ask when you're launching are, number one, what's most important to you, the customer, about blank? Don't build yet. What's most important to you about blank? Say the person says, I want to build a great fitness thing that you can use at home. Okay. That's what they're building a great fitness thing. And they ask you, what's most important to you about a great fitness thing? Well, here's what happens. I say that it's easy to use. Now, here's the problem. Easy to use means a million different things to a million different people. What most entrepreneurs who are launching do is they take easy to use and they build what they think is easy to use. And then they put it out in the marketplace and it doesn't get the result they want. So the second question that you ask is, what has to happen? How do you know that it's easy to use? And what happens is the buyer gives you what I call their buyer blueprint. They're gonna say, I want it to be mobile. I use an iOS, not an Android. I want to pay for it once, not every month. They'll give you all those things. As an entrepreneur launching, what you do is build to that. Just build that and push that out, and it will give you a much higher chance of being successful at the get-go.
No, I think that is absolutely a great advice, and I think that something definitely people should take to heart. Well, as we wrap up, and there are always plenty more fun things that we could talk about, but as we're wrapping towards the end of the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to use your services, they want to be a client, a customer, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out or connect up with you?
Sure. The best place to go is scottduffy.com. SCOTTDUFFY, scottduffy.com, or hit me up on social media at Scott Duffy Media across all channels.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out for you. A lot of value you can add, and it's certainly worthwhile to connect up with you. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Scott. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to come on the podcast, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com. We'd love to share your journey. Also, two more things if you're a listener. One, click subscribe so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. Two, leave us a review so lots of new people can find us. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents or trademarks or anything else, reach out to us at Miller IP Law. Just go to strategymeeting.com. Thank you again, Scott. It's been a pleasure, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin.